Okay, sorry about that, people. I didn't realize that the microphone was turned off. It's on now. Hopefully, thanks for pointing that out. So, yeah, we'll start again. Just coming into your standing posture and give yourself a few moments to settle in, paying attention to your posture, partly to obviously come into a better posture. This is an important element in the art, always trying to maintain certain aspects of posture, but also recognizing that whether or not we sort of get to that point of ideal posture, if such a thing exists, the very act of bringing your attention into your body will have a settling effect on your thoughts. They'll still bounce around, but let's just remind yourself, you're here, you've made the space to attend the class or maybe to watch the recording. I like the image as far as the mind is concerned. I think it probably works for the body as well, that if you get a jar of muddy water, stand it on the table, just leave it there, then eventually the mud will settle. In practice, of course, we keep bumping into the table, the mud keeps getting stirred up, but we come back to this awareness of posture and then in all its subtleties. Or if you're new, there may not be any subtleties. It may just be an awareness of your feet or something like that. They begin to anchor your attention. What we're looking for is for our weight to be slightly forwards in our feet, about 70% of your weight in the front half of your feet. So you can feel that pressure in the balls of your feet. And that gives you a slight angle forwards, which should encourage a feeling of just settling back. We sit into the hips. The upper body sits into our hips sit into the ground. Soften your knees. It will be strong in your legs. But this is the beginning of the rooting down, the dropping of your center of gravity. And again, it's like the jar of muddy water. These movements, these postures that we take often go against our habitual postures. So after a few moments, you settle down, then you realize you've stiffened up again, so you settle down again. But eventually, it becomes a kind of more sustainable posture. And bring your attention to the middle part of your body, between hips and waist. Just here, belly, lower back. And begin to turn in your hips. Feel that movement going up through your body, into your waist, into your ribs, into your shoulders, and then feeling your arms being pulled around. Imagine you're doing this in water, or maybe you've got heavy bags in each hand, so you're not just moving your arms around, you're actively swinging your arms. Just trying to get a sense for the true weight of your arms. Loosen your fingers, try and let the big muscles of your arms, the radial and the biceps and the triceps, just begin to soften a little bit. So maybe beginning to feel the movement going a little bit deeper, tendons, ligaments, bones. And when you've got that sort of feel for it, when that starts to make sense to you, which it wasn't necessarily to start off with, then you'll find that you're able to imagine that happening in other parts of your body. And when we begin to focus our imagination, our intent, we intend to feel like that in, say, our back or our chest or even our legs. And with the practice comes the ability to use intent more creatively. Our bodies respond to images and memories, to ideas, to instructions. They do this all the time, really. In Tai Chi, we try and do that more deliberately. And so this is one of the aspects of the art that gradually develops out of that more focused attention. It's hard to be intent. It's hard to be aware of, say, what's happening in your arms. If your thoughts are about, I don't know, what you're doing this afternoon, or what's happening this evening, or what happened a year ago, or wherever our thoughts drift away to. It's like those conversations where you're chatting to somebody and then you suddenly say, how did we get here? Kind of what, we weren't talking about this 10 minutes ago. Our thoughts proliferate. And there's nothing wrong with thinking, by the way. It's just that we don't want to be led around by our thoughts. So this is sometimes referred to as letting go. I think letting go makes it sound a little bit too easy. It's a bit of a cliche, but it is apt, really, because it's almost like sometimes we have this thought and we follow it along down the pathway, whereas a bit like if you're walking a dog and it's pulling on the lead, and if you can just let go of the lead, the dog will run off. Which obviously, if you're walking a dog, you don't want to happen, but you don't have to follow those thoughts the whole time. The important ones will come back, and that letting go is mirrored in our body with that release of tightness and stiffness in joints and muscles. As an indication of what it can feel like. If I keep going with what you're doing, but if I hold my fist here really tight, it's really quite painful. It's very uncomfortable. My wrist is tight and so on. I could just let it relax, but if I let it relax, there's nothing there. There's no structure. Or I could do this. If you watch the middle of the fist, if I just open out a little bit, so there's a gap down there. That change from the tightness to that softer quality, retaining the structure. It's kind of how it feels when we talk about releasing, letting go in a physical term, and indeed in a mental term. And that feeling of your weight beginning to settle, like the jar of muddy water again, is, if you like, facilitated through that letting go. And so again, our center of gravity begins to gradually drop. We become better rooted. And that may mean that your hips drop more, but not necessarily. The letting go is a feeling within your body that can lead to a physically deeper stance, but it doesn't work the other way around. Bending your knees more doesn't mean that you'll let go more. And gradually we begin to loosen up. We get a much freer, more fluid movement through the upper part of our body. So, as well as being a good exercise in its own right, this exercise and this process of sort of just reflecting on what's going on offers a number of things that we're going to look for and try and sustain in the other exercises. So it serves both to prepare our body, get the blood circulating, we warm up a little bit, so on and so forth, as you would do for any physical activity, should do for any physical activity. And at the same time, we're reminding ourselves of those basic mental processes. And Tai Chi is a mind-body art, one that will break down the barriers between what we think of as body and what we think of as mind. The two aren't nearly as separate. Obviously, some things are much more concerned with the body, some things are much more concerned with the mind, but there's inevitably an overlap between them, and it's in that area of overlap that we really work with cultivating Tai Chi. Then your hands palm out, raise them up a little bit. So your hands are slightly in front of your shoulders the whole time. You're not just doing this, you're turning your body. This should encourage a much broader, longer feeling, but particularly broader feeling in your back. Your back is supporting the front of your body, so just see if you can allow the rib cage, solar plexus, belly, and all the internal organs to just drop slightly, rather than feeling that you have to somehow hold them up and put a lot of effort into holding them up. Then the hands drop down. So in this posture, just begin to rock your weight forwards and backwards, pivoting from your ankles, recognizing that when you go too far, you're going to have to take a step and or you'll stiffen up. And just moderating the movement until you can still feel that you're angled forwards a little bit, still feel that you're angled backwards, but you haven't got that same sense of gripping, tightening in certain parts of your body. Tai Chi seeks to improve our movement, both the external movement that we can see, but also that sense of movement within the body, the flow, the harmonization of the energy. In the first instance, by removing as much as possible the barriers to those movements. And one of the key barriers is going to be the fact that we're struggling, we're straining against the pull of gravity. You know, if you're a long way forwards in this and you're kind of holding on, otherwise you're gonna fall over. It's quite difficult to make those smooth flowing movements. So Tai Chi seeks to blend with, to harmonize with that significant force acting through our body. And this exercise is the one that helps us to do that. So it's a valuable exercise, simple though it is. If I put the pole here, two aspects to this. If you imagine the pole as representing a center line in my body going from the crown of my head to my to the ground between my feet, and just you can see the pole is moving with me. So I'm not doing something like this or this, moving away from that. Again, the pivot point is my ankles. The other way of thinking of this is that I'm going to leave the pole still as much as possible, that when I move away from it, I can go to here reasonably comfortably, but as soon as I go a bit further, I start to fall. So it becomes a reference point for us to judge how far we can move out of that line with the pull of gravity. But in the first instance, we want to find that line. So trying to come to a point where you don't feel that either in front or back you're being pulled, but rather that you feel the pull of gravity working down through the body into your hips, and allow your hips to drop a little bit more, not too far, but you'll feel in the lower position that there's quite a response from your legs. And then just let your legs push you up to the first position and sinking down. In the process of sinking down, once again, we would like to feel every now and then a sort of deepening of our center of gravity. And this comes through the letting go. You know, I was talking about, it's like you've been carrying a heavy bag, you put it down, suddenly you go, oh, thank goodness for that little thing. It's not going to happen every time you sink down. And that helps with our stability, of course. The lower your center of gravity, the more stable you will be. The more stable you are, the less tightness there is within the body, the more fluid the movement, once again. But also, like being on a trampoline or a bouncy castle, it's the sinking down that is actually the sort of prerequisite for the movement upwards. If you're on a trampoline, you have to drop down first before it pushes you up. So once we've begun to find that line with the pull of gravity, we yield to the pull of gravity. We allow it to move through our body. We don't strain against it. We let our weight, our center of gravity go down into our feet and into the ground between our feet. And we allow the legs to respond in this natural response of our whole body, but principally our legs at this point, to push up. So we have a cycle of movement, a cycle of energy, yielding first of all to the pull of gravity, and then just allowing the movement up. First few exercises make very active use of this, bringing your hands around as though you're cradling a ball, pushing up, keeping your hands close to your body, letting the movement upwards, push your elbows out, turn your hands over so they're draped over a ball, and then sink your hips with your shoulders going down. It's like you're pushing the ball down into the water. Turn your hands at the bottom and push up, with expanding and contracting. As you get used to this, you can also feel it's not just your legs. The spine too has that springy quality about it. So there's a gentle, very gentle sense of almost compression of the spaces between the vertebrae where the cartilage pads are, which then push back up. So you begin to feel the expansion through your body, from the sole of your foot, right up through your legs, through your spine, and eventually, of course, into your arms. So it takes a while to develop this, but eventually we get this sense of our whole body moving as one unit. Letting your breathing come smoothly, responding to your posture and your movement, rather than trying to force a breathing method or a breathing pattern. So a couple of exercises giving some variation on this. Sinking down, turn your hands out. This is the wild goose. So think of a bird in flight, if that's a good image for you. It may convey some kind of quality. And again, that imagery is fed through our intent into our body. It's not necessarily the case that you'll always respond to an image. Might not be the right image for you, in which case, it may come to mean something, but for the moment, just, and you have to let that go. Don't force anything. Still using your legs. Your hips go up, your shoulders go up, your hands go up. Hips go down, shoulders go down, hands go down. Just aware of that flow of movement within your body developing. The next one, parting the clouds, cross your hands in front of you, in front of your belly, push up again, elbows going out, and hands being drawn around gently. And then down. Stand back so you can, my fingers don't disappear. So parting the clouds. I don't know what it's like where you are at the moment, as I'm teaching this. It's very grey and dull outside. It was very sort of oppressive. If the sun were to come out, there would be this lovely sort of opening, expansive quality. And I think this exercise carries some of that quality with it. We're not stretching. So you should feel as though at the top of the movement, you could have moved a little bit further, maintaining just a feeling of spaciousness within the body. Now, let your hands drop down and on one side, again, starting with your elbow, then your elbow drops down, so your hand goes up a little bit. Roll your fingers into that hollow fist that I showed you earlier and twist, and rotate from the shoulder. Don't rush, but then change to the other side. This is Dragon Plucks the Stars from the Sky. You may well find yourself doing this. You get down and you're almost there, and the other hand is starting to twitch. Just remind yourself that we're not in a hurry. And the way I think of this when I find myself doing that is I follow the hand in my mind's eye all the way down. I open my fingers, then I let my attention pan across to my other side, and then I push up. It only takes a moment in time, in reality. But the panning is like, you know, if you see a documentary and a camera pans across a landscape or across a view. And that just puts in this little sort of spaciousness between the actual movement that you can see. A quality that I sometimes describe as being like a comma in a sentence. And it just means that we're less likely to get that feeling of sort of speeding up, almost like we're running downhill. This is Dragon Plucks the Stars from the Sky. People with more experience with this, and well, maybe not, but it might suit you anyway. But actually, this movement up and down in our hips is a result of, remember, the pull of gravity through our body and our body's response to that. Now, you don't necessarily have to have the actual physical movement. You do need your hips sinking back. But see if you can just quieten that movement down, reduce the amount of movement that your hips make until you're working with the sensation of downward and upward movement within your body. That's a much more subtle way of doing it, and chances are you'll get a little bit of that way along and then you'll lose it, so you go back to the bigger movement. We could do this with any of the movements really, because we're concerned as much with those qualities of movements, those patterns of movements within our body as we are with the external movement. Do one more of these on each side. And then let your hands drop down. And just stand for a moment. Now the next exercise doesn't go up and down anyway, but we do still have this sense of sinking back. So we want a posture, remember, that allows the free flow of movement, of gravity through your body, and the resultant movement, the resultant energy up through your body. This movement and the next few movements will show us how that energy is shaped and directed through the center of the body, again, the area between hips and waist. Start with your hands in that position, just next to your hips, and then raise them up, this time just a little bit above your head. And then slowly down. Again, I'm still sinking back. Hands are slightly in front of my body. Alternate this one with sideways movement. Always return into the center part of your body so the movement expands and contracts. And so on a regular basis, your attention is drawn back to the center of your body and from there down into the ground. Again, with that sort of comma in a sentence type approach. This time, when you push out, you're going to turn in your hips a little bit, and that sends your hand in a slightly different angle. And then back. Don't just twist your shoulders around. turn your whole upper body, turning as one unit to begin with, and then back, and then push out to the side. So 4 movements, just pushing in 4 directions. Nice long feeling in your back. As you push out, broad across your back, and keeping that feeling as you turn, not straining in the muscles of your back. And then in the other direction, and back, and then facing forwards and pushing out. And this exercise shows very nicely, I think, that rhythm that I was talking about, yang extending, yin contracting. And all of the exercises really are very regular with that. Those of you who are used to maybe a Tai Chi form or something, it's not quite that straightforward. But most of these exercises, that's a very regular, steady rhythm. And so again, it encourages us to build this capacity to come back to the basic posture, the root, the sense of being centered, the sense of being calm and quiet in my mind. We sort of touch base as part of a regular pattern of mind and body. One more round. So trying to maintain this posture, your hips sitting back. And then letting your hands drop down, feeling the weight of your arms hanging. And with the next expansion, one arm is pushed out to the side, swings up above your head until it's in line with your nose. It comes straight down that forward center line of your body. In the opening through the side there. And then, if it's comfortable, when your hand gets to that top position, once again, just turn a little bit in the center of your body. Careful not to twist your shoulders around. And then changing sides. Notice any difference between one side and another. There quite often is. And if it's comfortable for you, add in the turn. Again, seeing how significant this area between hips and waist is. It's the area of the body that drops down to the ground for the rooting down. It's the part of the body that controls the movement, that shapes the movement. So it becomes a really important point of focus. Now, what we've done so far has been turning horizontally in that area. Now, go back to this, just sinking down and pushing up. We keep the pelvis level, or rather the pelvis stays level. It's not so much a case of making it be level, because it's a very natural thing for our pelvis to level off. If you don't feel that it's doing that, you might want to look at why, maybe tension in your back or stiffness in your knees, or something might be but blocking that movement. So rather than forcing the movement, we would look for ways to remove the blockage. And this is very much a chicken and egg situation. We sink down just a little bit, but then we hit a barrier. But because we've sunk down a little bit, we've dropped our center of gravity, we've created a little bit more space in the body, and we can just move a little bit, and gradually that space dissolves outwards, and we can drop a little bit more, and then we can just keep going with that. So it's really a never-ending process. What we're going to do now, I'm going to come closer so you can see what I'm doing, is this. As I sink down, I'm going to deliberately push my hips back so my pelvis tilts. That sends my head and shoulders forwards. And then I let my hips drop back, and I feel how that brings my head up slowly, and I push up. You don't have to do it this big. Be careful of your back, your knees. Look for this adjustment in your pelvis here, bringing you to the upright position and push up. Easy and gently. And we're going to use this movement in 2 exercises. First is called rowing a boat in the middle of the lake. Arms come up, and so as your head and shoulders get pushed forwards by your hips going back, your arms follow. Again. Rowing a boat in the middle of the lake. One more time. The next exercise combines both the horizontal and the vertical rotation. So we start with our hands in front of us. You turn horizontally, then you push the hips back, and that sends the hands forwards. Turn again and let your hips drop down and come back to the central position. Then turn the other way. This is called polishing the table. Don't overextend your arms. Don't strain in your shoulders. Just from the hips up through your back and spine, over your shoulders, down your arms into your fingertips. It feels like almost like a thread of elastic being very gently extended outwards, never to its full length, and then coming back quite naturally. So your arms follow the movement created in the rest of your body. Polishing the table. One more on each side. And then so there we have most of the basic elements of movement that we put together into Tai Chi. One of the phrases in one of the old writings in Tai Chi is very illuminating. I feel that the movement is rooted in the feet, this dropping of our center of gravity, and all the implications of that. Transmitted through our legs, and we can see here, and we'll see again in a few moments, the sinking down, the pushing up, the legs carry the energy, if you like, downwards into our feet and upwards into the rest of our body. Controlled, directed, shaped through the center of the body. So in a very real sense, our intent is distributed, shall we say, through this central part of the body, like an old style telephone exchange or something like that, where all the wires went in and somebody talking would, it would go along the wire to the telephone exchange, and then it would go out along another wire to whoever was on the other end of the line. And then finally expressed in our arms. And for arms, just really read the whole of the upper body. So we literally move from our center in Tai Chi. The same piece of writing also has a single line that simply says first in the mind. And that takes us back to this initial sense of just coming into our body very gently in our awareness. So mind, body, energy, these are the three treasures of Tai Chi Chuan and Qigong. And really what we're trying to do is to bring them together so that they're no longer separate. We're going to change the stance. So the feet stay hip width apart, so not too close together, not too wide because that gets quite tiring. Weight a little bit forwards, sinking down. And again, particularly people who are used to this, really look for this, as you release this sense of movement, this sense of energy coming up and filling the body. And also look for this sense, just as your body settles, so the mud settles, your awareness just touches that base, shall we say. And then from this position, turn one foot out, have the other foot forwards. Imagine you're standing on the diagonal corners of the square, maybe a bit longer if you can drop your hips a bit more, and begin to transfer your weight. And once again, there's a comma here in the sentence. And it's each time you arrive in one leg, just give yourself a moment and ask yourself, am I releasing? Can I really feel that sense of my weight dropping down? Can I feel the contact with the ground? And you'll find that this becomes quite habitual. So we begin to recognize that the inevitability of this rhythm of yin yang, that one way or another, a yang movement, an expanding movement, being active, looking out in one way or another, relating to the outside world for one reason or another, is always going to be followed by a drawing in, whether we like it or not, or whether we actually fight against that or allow it to happen and make use of it is obviously our own personal choice. But it will happen. What goes up must come down. And so we get used to this idea that there's this regular punctuation mark. There are these regular moments when we can settle and just a little bit of space in our minds, perhaps. And eventually that becomes a useful technique so that when we're under stress, for one reason or another, rather than just sort of reacting to that automatically, without thinking, without awareness, we're able to just take a little bit of space and consider the situation just for a moment. Now, sink back into your back foot and raise the front toes. If you've done this before, remember your hips are dropping. Have the front foot turned out. Push your back knee forward when you're on the front foot. And again, a little bit stronger here. So that feeling of settling and that moment of comma, there's a moment of punctuation, as I described it, isn't an absence of movement. It's a change in the type of movement. Rather than go forwards and backwards, we're just taking a moment to settle down. And you'll see from this position, more of your weight starts to flow down through each leg. And that makes it possible to do this. You go forwards and then you just draw your foot in and push out again. Draw in and push out. I said earlier that one of the attributes of rooting down is to show us that yielding to the pull of gravity, that yin movement of allowing ourselves to drop down, is actually the movement that initiates the yang. And in the same way, from a kind of point of view of our minds, if that's a reasonable distinction, which it probably isn't, then it's those moments when we settle that actually, as we can see here, allow us to do something quite important, which is to take a step. Whereas if you're somebody who has a bit of trouble with this and things like that, and you're not settling, it's going to be and it's just going to get worse and worse. You just break the cycle of having to rush or being anxious with that little moment of stillness. And then you make the move. And it really is a split second. At first, I put a lot of emphasis on it, so it takes a few seconds. But eventually, we develop this quality described rather lovely again in the old writings of Tai Chi, that there's a stillness within the movement. This is not either or in the end. Shake hand. So from here, going your back foot out, step forwards with the front foot, a square stance. You can do this in other stances, but this is the best one to really develop that ability, which we would then take into other movements. After a while, you want to try and be very precise about how much your weight is moving. So when you go into the front leg, you've got about 60% of your weight there and then 40% in the back. When you go into the back foot, you've got 70 in the back, 30% in the front. And the whole time you're doing this, again, if I get the pole, you're trying to maintain that upright position. You see, I'm moving with that. Chances are, I'll do something like this. I'll kind of lean forwards or back, or my head will go out of line, or something will go wrong. And so when I'm in that little moment of punctuation, there's a chance that I can just begin to adjust my posture. So what we want to try and do is develop the postures and our awareness of the postures, so that what initially takes quite a lot of thinking about and quite a long time becomes quite intuitive to us. So again, another use, if you like, for that moment of settling is that in that moment we turn back towards a much more useful posture. And then once again, raising your toes and your heel. And that means that the percentage of weight flowing down through your leg increases until there's hardly any weight at all left in what we would refer to in Tai Chi as the empty leg. Leg with the weight flowing down, the majority of the weight flowing down is the full leg, the other leg is the empty leg. And that's when we can step in, because then it's a minimum of effort to make a step. Step in, just check in. Yeah. Hips, palms, are they still level? It's quite common to find that we might have sort of done something like this. And then, of course, you're going to start feeling very wobbly. So the toes go down and it's quite useful. And then just taking a few steps either forwards or backwards, depending on where the room is. With the first couple, again, put the toes down before you push forwards. go back out to hip width. You can have the front foot turned out again. Same thing on this side. And then changing direction. And eventually you will get to this point where you don't really need to put the toes down all the time. Put them down occasionally. Just notice how your posture is maybe changing. Have this idea of that basic posture. It's why we started off the class with that posture. Why we will finish with the same posture. And bring the feet parallel. There's various terms used to describe the feeling of that posture. I like the one Chinese term is zhongding, and the translation of that would be central equilibrium. So we're trying to maintain that quality of equilibrium the whole time. That would be lovely. In practice, it doesn't really happen, but what we can do is learn to come back to it. Now have your right foot forwards. Now we bring our arms back into the movement. So I move my weight forwards, my arms are just hanging behind slightly, but then they follow and they swing. And the same thing going back, like you're throwing a sheet over a bed or rolling a ball along the ground. Rooted in your feet, transmitted through your legs, directed through the middle of your body, expressed through your upper body, but specifically in your arms. So here, we're moving forwards and backwards, we're looking ahead, and so our arms are swinging forwards and backwards. Very simple. This time, though, you go back, and as you go back, you turn to your left in the direction of the back foot. Same exercise, just letting your arms swing through, but now they're being drawn across your body. You're not doing anything different with your arms, really. They feel a bit different, but the change is in that center part of your body. Simply turning changes the nature of the movement. And then this time, as they swing down, let them continue upwards. And when they reach shoulder height, go forwards and turn. Their arms will come down, so passing across your hips and then going back. Making a sort of sideways figure of eight movement. Don't overextend your arms. This time, raise your back heel and bring that foot in. Step back first, move your weight, turn, and bring front foot in. Same thing again, and maybe, again, it's not obligatory, but if it's comfortable, just raising your hands and your knee and step back. And then, and step back. Okay, and then try that on the other side with your left foot forwards, hip width across your feet, not too long a stance. First of all, fisherman castanet, rooted in your feet, transmitted through your legs, controlled through the center of your body, which is where your attention, where your intent rests. It's almost as though from that position, that grounded position, the center of the body sitting into the ground. It's like walking along a cliff path and then just sitting down and looking out at the sea. We're just observing. And then through that observation, you can begin to focus your intent. And when we turn in the center of the body, then we observe how that changes the direction of the arms. And we begin to build on that. It's not the end of the story, but it is the essential starting point. And we can work on refining the movements endlessly, really. Your hands swing up into the sort of sideways figure eight. Some people think of this as the infinity sign that they use in physics and mathematics. And then turn the front foot out a little bit and through, step in. In that moment, you know, is your pelvis level and so on and so forth, coming back. And then begin to raise your knee if it's comfortable. If you find that you get really unstable doing that, you just leave it for now. Keep that feeling though of your hips sinking backwards. If you try and raise the leg and you come up like that, will go all over the place. So it's almost as though as I start to raise the leg, I'm sinking down more in my hip. I went down a little bit too far, my knee went out of line there. So I do this and then I drop down, and that helps my stability. And this time, I'm going to take a step forwards again, step back if that's where the room is, coming through, not hurrying the movement. One more time going forwards. And then going back. Forwards depends which way you were going initially. Remember that little comma when your foot comes in, whether it's on the floor or not, can you get that sense of just sinking gently? And then this time, just bring your feet parallel again. Good. So, rubbing your hands together. Tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Onto one shoulder. Your arm. The other side. Push your back. Around your hips. Down the outside of your legs and up the inside. Right on your belly. And then the upper pocket. Yes. Going back to this idea of returning, and you know, this relates to the comma in the sentence and so on and so forth. It's one of the really valuable skills that we learn in Tai Chi, which is to, if not maintain all the time, that would be nice, but it's probably unrealistic, but at least have a sense of being able to come back to central equilibrium in mind and body. And the image for that, for me, one of the images that I really like is the image of a mountain. because it carries that quality of stillness and strength, but they're also quite dynamic things, aren't they? So this last exercise is called Embrace Tiger, Return to the Mountain. So sinking down, pushing up. The tiger's just a metaphor for everyday life, really. But what we learn to do is every now and then just come back to the mountain. So it's worth just observing this once again and feeling what it is that brings you back. Is it the memory of sinking down, the memory of that stillness and spaciousness? Is it the physical dropping of your hips, the image of the mountain, or it could be anything? So, when things are getting on top of you at work, or the kids are being annoying, or traffic's jammed up, or whatever it is that starts to irritate us, to make us feel a little bit unhappy with things, we have a way of just once again letting that go for a moment. More time. And stand. A couple of slow, gentle breaths. Thank you very much for watching, everybody. Thanks for your time. I hope that was useful for you.